This is a production of World Video Bible School. To God be the glory.
Isn't Genesis a great book? I enjoy studying it every single time I go through it. And it seems that I discover more and more each time. Isn't that true with God's wonderful Word? That the more you study, the more you learn. It makes no difference how often or how many times you study. It is still beautiful, it still enriches your life, and it helps prepare you to go to heaven. We're beginning in chapter 40 in this particular section. And we have Joseph in prison now. He's in the preferred prison where Pharaoh's prisoners go. And we're going to see here where he is going to be interpreting some dreams. The chief butler and the chief baker fall out of favor with Pharaoh, and they are put in prison under Joseph's care. And like I said before, that just amazes me. Here is a prisoner over other prisoners. He is so trusted that other prisoners are put in his care. If you look back at the traditions at this time, if somebody lost a prisoner, their life was forfeit for the prisoners. And yet here we have a slave, a prisoner, being put in the layer of command. That's a lot of faith. This man is putting his life on the line, as it were, by allowing Joseph to even be in this kind of a position. But he is. God's providence, again, is taking hold. We see in verses 5 through 8 that both men have a dream. And, of course, in prison, they've got no access to interpreters. Were there interpreters of dreams? Oh, yes. People who would interpret them. They weren't of God. Sometimes they'd be accurate, sometimes they would not. And we see that today, do we not? We have different individuals that claim to make prophecies at the beginning of every year, and it always marvels me. It always marvels me to see the headlines that this person predicts this and this one predicts this, and they list 5, 6, 8, 10 things that are going to happen in the next year. And you know, if they hit 1, 2, fine. If they hit 3 or 4 out of the 10 that are right, they think they're so great. My friend, that's still over 60% wrong. How can we put faith in people like that? But anyway, they had nobody there to interpret their dreams for them. Besides, Joseph is going to ask to hear their dreams, but what does he say? The interpretation belongs to Jehovah God. The interpretation is not going to belong to Joseph. He does not claim credit for it. He gives it to his God. He gives exactly the credit that has belonged to the right one. I have a question. How about today as we look around our societies? What about astrology? Is that still being used? People studying the stars and making predictions off of them? Absolutely. This has been throughout, it seems, all of man's history. One great religion, Zoroastrianism, for instance, is a lot based upon astrology. In fact, we have the wise men, do we not, coming to Jerusalem, and when Jesus is born or shortly afterwards, and they were Zoroastrians from what we can tell by the way they read the stars and things, following that faith, looking to those. But incidentally, that was a very unique religion in that it was very close to being the true religion, but it was not. Even though it was close, it was not God's true religion. How about horoscopes today? Often I forget and I add an extra letter into that word, and I'll say horoscopes. Horoscopes. Well, really, horoscopes are made so that you can feel good about yourself. What sign of the zodiac were you born under, and what's going to happen to you in the current day or the days ahead because of just what month or what season you happen to be born in according to all of this. Well, I remember very distinctly, I was preaching in a small town up in Iowa, state here in the United States, And I was visiting in the home of one of the members, and they had there, with their children from school, from grade school, they had the newspapers that are sent all over the nation. It's a little weekly that they send out. I think it was called Reader's Weekly or something like that. And in this, that's going to all of the children all over the United States, horoscopes. Horoscopes in there, teaching our children to look to these things as valid. Think about that. It's still very much alive today. You pick up any newspaper practically in the United States and you can go find that section and it'll tell you what's happening based upon astrology or whatever. They make those predictions and people just live by them. They believe in them. When they've got the Bible so close they could believe in it and follow it, but instead they follow these false teachings. Palm readers, are they still around? Every time I go into this small town over here called San Marcos and we go down the highway, there's a great big billboard advertising a lady who is a palm reader and she would like you to come in and have your palm read. Yeah, advertising on the side of the road, great big thing. It's probably, maybe 20 feet wide and 18, maybe 16 feet tall. Advertising, palm reading. It's still here. I'm afraid, my friends, it is still with us. All right, we're going to have the dreams now. First one is the butler's dream. I want to look at verse 9 through 11. Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, Behold, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. It was as though it budded. Its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth rich grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. There's his dream. Joseph, with God, is going to tell him what this means. Well, he says, you're going to be restored to your former position. And that number 3 is important because it's going to be in 3 days. Now, you think about this, what's happening in 3 days? Pharaoh's having a birthday, isn't he? And this is coming. But in 3 days, this man is going to be restored. Well, the baker, he's listened to all of this, of course, and says, ooh, that was good. Let me tell you mine. I'd like to have an interpretation like that too. I want good things to happen is the idea, I'm sure, that's in his mind. And so in verse 16, he begins to tell, when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and there I had 3 baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket, there were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. A little bit different in the dream now. And of course, Joseph has to tell him what Jehovah made known to him that it means. It means the baker is going to be hanged in 3 days. That number 3 is important again. Well, the interpretations that he gives them come true. Come true. Well, they naturally would. If God is saying what they mean, they will naturally come true. And they do. And what did Joseph ask now of the butler? He says, when this good is done to you, please remember me and remember me to Pharaoh. Tell him about me. He wants out of that place. He doesn't want to be in that prison. But what happens? Well, butler forgets. And don't we do that sometimes today? Things are going kind of rough in our life, and we say, and we may even make a pledge to the Lord. Some people even try to bargain with him. But make a pledge, Lord, if I just come through this, I'll do this and this and this. And we come through it, but do we do this and this and this for the Lord? No. Or something comes up and we even make a pledge to somebody else. and the things become good around us and we forget those things. We forget those pledges. It's normal. So normal for most of us. It happens all the time. Well, in chapter 41 now, we're going to see the exaltation of Joseph again. He's going to rise one more time. 2 years later, Pharaoh has 2 dreams. Not one, but 2 dreams now. The first one, 7 lean cattle devour 7 fat cattle. And 7 lean ears of corn devour 7 fat ears of corn. They really sound familiar, don't they? I mean, similar is the word I want. They sound alike, and they are. But what happens now? Nobody can interpret the dream. But the butler, what happens with him? He remembers Joseph and tells Pharaoh about him. Remembers him, and finally, yes, I know about a man that can answer, can tell you about the dreams. Pharaoh immediately calls for him. He wants him. Bring this man here. All the rest of these people around me, they can't do anything. They can't answer. They can't tell me what the situation is. Call this man up here right now. And as you see immediately, what does Joseph? He shaves, he puts on clean clothes, he gets ready to be presented before this man. And he goes, and he is told then in the dreams. But notice again in verse 16, who does the credit go to? Joseph gives it to Pharaoh. And he says, he gives Pharaoh the good news that it's coming from God. It is coming from God. And he says, God will give you an answer of peace. In other words, it will be right. It will be accurate. So he interprets the dreams. He says they're actually really only one dream. Really only one dream here. One dream. Therefore, there can only be one interpretation, not 2. And you can see they were very similar. And so he gives them the answer. He said there are 7 good years followed by, but not just followed by, but consumed by 7 famine years. These are going to be severe famine years. And again, why the double? Why 2 dreams? Well, he makes it very clear. The 2 dreams mean that it is absolutely fixed, is the word. That God has said it. This is the way it is going to be. There's no probability about it. This is going to happen just the way that it was told to you as interpreted for your dreams. Joseph does something very good at that point. He says, all right, he says, I've really told you what these mean, but I have some advice for you, Pharaoh. Can you imagine that? He's going to give Pharaoh some advice, and he does. He says, you look out now. You look out around you, and you get some wise men. He didn't say wise man, he said wise men. And let them manage this for you. Let them gather during the good years so that during the bad years you will have. Good advice. Well, again, Pharaoh operates, makes a decision, but you can see God operating in all of this too, can you not? He says, who else then but you? Joseph, you're the one. You're the one that should be doing this. Now, I wonder, did Pharaoh just make that on the spur of a moment? Or did he perhaps not know a little history about this man, Joseph? Did he possibly not know that everything had prospered, not only in the prison while he was there, but back at Potiphar's house? You see, Potiphar is a very high official too. It's very possible that he already knows about this man. And then when the interpretation comes, who else to choose but a man with this kind of ability? Here's the man. Let us use you. And so he promotes him again, where? Right up to the top. Nobody in the kingdom greater except Pharaoh in the throne. That's it. Nobody will be a higher rank than he. quite a promotion. I mean, from prison to this position. He is no longer a prisoner. In fact, really, he's no longer technically a slave. What does he do now for Joseph? What does Pharaoh do for him? Well, first thing he does is give him an Egyptian name. Changes his name, people will accept him. Zaphnath Paaneah, he names him. That's a mouthful, isn't it? But he gives him something else. He gives him a wife, an Egyptian woman. And she is, as we would say, quote, well-born. She is high up in society. So, not only did he promote him, not only did he give him an Egyptian name, but he also elevates him way up the social scale by marriage. Pharaoh is not dumb. This is a wise man. And God is using him, as he is Joseph and all the others. What is her name? Asenath. Asenath, and she is the daughter of Potipharah. He is a priest of On. Don't make the mistake of thinking that On is the name of the god. That's the name of a town. He is the priest of this town, like you would have a priest of Austin, Texas, for instance, or you'd have a priest of some other town. The name of the god was Ra, R-A. He was a sun god. He was a priest of Ra, the sun god, but he was a priest of On. He was the priest in that town for that god. So Joseph gathers food for the famine. It's rather interesting as you read through here. He gathers it, and he gathers more, and he gathers more. Now, he's a good administrator, and obviously he's keeping records. But it comes to the point when he just quits taking inventory. The amount that he's taking is so great, there's just no keeping track of it anymore. No keeping track. Is God blessing this land with great abundance during these 7 years? Yes. Is he really providing for all of these people in the drought that's coming? Yes. So much so that he can't even keep track of it anymore. I've heard people question whether this really happened or not, but I was reading here not too long ago, a couple years ago, and it seems that they have found great, almost like cisterns underground, great big, large cavities, and they didn't know what they were, and they went down into them, and guess what they found in the bottom of it? Grain. It was a granary. It had been used to storage grain, and in fact, some of the seed was still good. Think about that. The Bible is vindicated one more time. The Bible is vindicated one more time. So, all the gathering goes on. What happens during this time? Joseph is blessed. He has 2 sons. Manasseh, meaning making to forget, and Ephraim, double fruit or fruitful. Now, how about the interpretation of the dream? It's going to come too. Yes, we've seen it in the good years, but the bad years are coming also. The bad years are coming also. And the severe, severe drought, famine is coming upon the land. Chapter 42, the story now moves on. The brethren are going to come. They're going to come to Joseph. Where else to go? It had to be put around. The knowledge had to be given to all the areas around, because if you remember back in the text, what was the process? Here, all the gathering is made, all of it is being brought in. That news has to be getting around. It has to be getting around. There's no question about it. And so they hear about this, and they know then where to go for relief from the famine over in Canaan. The first journey is in chapter 42. Now, the journey of Joseph's brethren, -1, Benjamin. They're going to come down and purchase, to at least try to purchase and do accomplish it, but they're coming down to purchase food, grain. Now then, what about the time element here? It's about 22 years now between the sale of Joseph and the time his brothers will come to Egypt for food. 13 years to his promotion, 7 years of plenty, 2 years of famine. A long time, 22 years. 22 long years. Well, Jacob sends his 10 sons down to Egypt for food. What is the reason? That we may live and not die. It's important, and there's a lot of people involved here. It was a very strong famine. But Benjamin, he's not going to allow Benjamin to go. No. This is the last son from his favorite wife, the last one that he's aware of even at this point. And he does not want some calamity, some problem, some big catastrophe to come upon him. He says that he would go down to his grave in just grief if something would happen to this son also. He's still protective of Rachel's child. Well, they get to Egypt, and where do they buy grain? They have to go to where? To the man in charge. They have to go to Joseph. They don't recognize him, and he does not allow himself to be recognized by them. He knows who they are, but he's very wise in what he's doing in not letting them know right away who he is. He remembers his dreams. Remember those dreams where they were going to bow down to him? And even the heads of the family, not just these 10, but going back to Jacob. Yeah, he remembers this. And he sees where he is and what he's doing, and what are these men actually, what do they really physically do? They bow down before this man. They bow down before him. Well, he receives them. He asks about them, and they count themselves, would you believe, accurately to him. Accurately. The 10 that you see here, we are present. There's one at home, and one is not. They don't know they're talking to him, and one is not. They accurately tell of the sons. Well, Joseph thinks of something. He says, "You're spies." This plan comes to his mind. "You're spies. How will I know that you're not spies coming in on the land?" You know, really, that's a valid question for people coming in. Yes, they'd be coming in to buy, but they're wanting to see the land. What if somebody wanted to conquer the land? What if somebody way back up around into where Ur of the Chaldees was, well, up in that area, what if they would come down, send spies down to see if this would be a good time to attack? So, you know, really, it's not an out of the question approach that he's taking here at all. And so he says, you're spies. We need to prove you that you are spies. Why don't we just send one of you back for your brother, and we'll keep the rest of you here. We'll keep you as prisoners. Keep you as prisoners here. And send one back for that brother. Then I will know that you're not spies. Well, he keeps them in ward for 3 days. Can't you just imagine the conversation going on between these 10 men? Number one, what's happening? Number two, who will they send? You know, and all of the what ifs that are going through their minds. Now, you can see it all happening. He gives them 3 days to really get involved in their situation, to think it through. What's happening to us? What is going to happen to us? Well, after 3 days, he changes and says, one will remain behind. The rest of you go. Well, that makes sense too. All of this food has got to be taken back. Somebody's got to do it. Let the 9 do it. It's better than one trying to do it. And so he says it will be this way. Notice all this time here, they are beginning to understand that they've got problems, and what do they blame it on? At this point, they blame it upon themselves. This is what we have done, and this is God now punishing us for what we did to our brother, not knowing they were talking to him, not knowing that he was the one. They're saying this is punishment for what they did to Joseph. And Joseph all this time is speaking through an interpreter. That's right. Of course he speaks the language of the Egyptians. He has been brought up in Potiphar's house. He has been brought up in the prison. Now he's brought up in the nation. Of course he speaks the language. He learned it a long time back. So who is chosen? Simeon. Simeon is chosen to remain behind. Now what does Joseph do? Joseph restores their money and gives them extra rations for the trip. Well, as you'd expect, one of them discovers the money and fears. What is this that God has done to us? Why blame God? What about personal responsibility here? Read 42 and 21, where they first name themselves as responsible. It seems it is natural for men to look elsewhere to place the blame for their own faults and calamities. And I could have just as well said you and me in there, not them or they. Isn't that so natural? We want to look to others. I'll tell you, it's a great joy to work where I work. For that doesn't happen around here. When something is wrong and some of us has made a mistake, we just say, I made a mistake. And we go on and we correct it. But when you're trying to place blame on others, when you're trying to shift the blame from yourself all the time, this creates a bad atmosphere around. We don't have that here. And that's the way it should be everywhere. We should be able to just acknowledge when we've done wrong and then get it right. Why should we try to put blame on others for things that we have done? Or God, or whatever. Chance. We like to do that. No. Accept responsibility for the things that you do, especially those things that if they happen to go wrong, accept that responsibility and move on and get it corrected. People will appreciate it. People will appreciate it. Well, the 9 return to their father Jacob. They report everything that has happened. Can't you just see these men all trying to talk to their father and all explaining of everything that is going on? But they have to include that one message now that was sent back. If you go and you come back, but you bring your brother to prove that you are not spies. And Jacob's not going to listen to this. He's not going to pay attention. He's not going to heed their words, the words of this ruler of Egypt. He's not going to do it. This is still that special child. And he's going to protect that child if he can, even though he's a grown man at this point. He's a grown man at this point. Well, as time goes on, they're going to have to go back. But what also has happened on the way? They get here, and they're here, they're in the trip, and then what's happening? All of a sudden they open up the sacks and there's the money. Oh, what are we going to do now? All the money has been returned to them. And Jacob says, all right, and he speaks in absolute terms here. He says, number 1, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more. Simeon's no more. He's as good as dead. You're not going back. You're not taking Benjamin. Simeon is as good as dead. He is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin away. You bereave me of my children. He's placing blame squarely on their shoulders. Total accusation. The loss of these 3 are directly the responsible of these men standing in front of him, these 9. Oh, how close he was to the truth. Oh, how close he was. He says, my son will not go down there with you. What is he saying? If Benjamin dies, my days will be steeped in grief. In fact, I will grieve so hard it will eventually kill me if that boy goes and harm comes to him. Well, we know what happens. Time goes on. A second journey is going to have to be made, and this time with Benjamin. We see this in chapter 43. Well, Jacob struggles with this problem, but he finally decides to send Benjamin to Egypt. He sees the need for more food. And they have to remind him, that Egyptian, he made a demand on us. This young man has to return with us. And so Judah steps forward. He says, I will be surety. I will be responsible. I will take his place. I am the one that will be totally responsible. And the decision is made. But I want you to notice here that Judah, in making this decision, has put the need of the whole family up against his personal need for one son. He put their needs above his own and makes a good decision. That's something that we need to learn in the church. We need to be, yes, individually involved and individually concerned with every single soul. But it is the total of the kingdom that is also very important, and we need to place ourselves in subjection to those needs. We need to place ourselves in subjection to the needs of the church. That's hard to do, but we need to do it. Jacob shows wisdom again. Take presents. Take presents down there. Take double the money originally returned. Don't just take back what you found in the sacks, but double it. And then take more money for the new purchase. And take Benjamin. He doesn't like it. But again, he shows wisdom. The need for the whole has to be met. In verse 14, we have the idea here that Jacob is saying, there was not too long ago, and I was childless. Well, the older you get, the shorter life seems. And I can understand exactly what the man says. Not so many years ago, I was childless. And if it pleases God, I'll become that way again. Placing it with God. Let his providence handle it. Go. Take this, my son, with you. Well, Joseph greets them when they come back. And he sets out a noon feast for them. You know, that just has to concern the brothers. They've been gone some time. They just didn't go and come back. They've been gone some time now. And here he greets them and he sets a noon feast for them, and they fear a plot. Well, they don't know this Egyptian. They don't know who he is, and they fear a plot. How about guilty consciences? Does a guilty conscience usually blow all the circumstances way out of proportion? Yeah. You know, it seems that goes along with a guilty conscience. We just blow things out. What's going to happen? What kind of punishment is it going to be? What is the result of this? And we just imagine such horrible things. When if we just face it and handle it, it wouldn't nearly be as bad as we thought it could be. But the same situation has happened here. Guilty consciences are working on these. Even the Egyptian servant tries to settle their nerves. Yes, he says, your God is the provider in all of this. He's trying to take away some of their fears. Sounds to me like this is a pretty good man. And they are treated as true guests, not just somebody brought in to feed at a table, but as true guests. And of course then Simeon is brought out to be with them. He is brought out. And they're ready now to give their gifts to Joseph. A second time, the brothers bow down to him. Dreams are coming true, aren't they? Those dreams that he had way back in Canaan, that he told these brothers that got him into trouble, and to his father. And seeing Benjamin, his full brother, he has to control himself. He has to go off to the side and shed his tears. Had to shed his tears because he's so happy to see him. But he has to control himself at this point. And now, the guests are segregated, first of all, according to Egyptian custom. Joseph alone, I mean, his position and everything demands that he be served in a special position. And then the Egyptians by themselves, and then these Canaanites by themselves, these foreigners, these sheep herders. They are to be served separately. And so this is the noon meal. It's set out all properly. But they're also, these brothers are also very amazed and tried by the things that happen here. They are seated, but seated accurately by their ages. Now, you think about that. Some people seem to age quicker than others. Others seem to look youthful for a long time. And to then take these men and to line them perfectly by age, and you don't know them, what does this do? What does this say? They're amazed. Right by their ages, they are seated. And then they are really tried. For what does he do? But he honors Benjamin more than the other. He receives 5 times their portions. He wants to see if these 10 are still jealous over Rachel's children. He wants to know if the problem is still there. Well, we know the test is successfully met. The brothers, they meet it right for once. Chapter 44. Joseph sends them on their way home, but he does 2 things. The money goes back into the sacks again. Money goes back into the sacks. This hasn't cost them anything. This is God's providence taking care of them all the way around. God takes care of them, and Joseph is his instrument. So he puts the money back in their sacks, but he puts his silver cup, his personal cup, into Benjamin's. Another plot coming here. Something else is happening. So, under instructions of Joseph, the steward catches up to him after they've been on the way, and he accuses them of stealing. He says, "How could you, after you have been received the way you have, and after your money has been given back to you, and he has been so gracious to you, how could you mistreat all of this by being a thief in his house? How could you do this thing?" That's a real good question. How could they do it? Well, they react, quite frankly, as innocent men. They react as innocent men. They claim their innocence. They'd already returned the previous monies. Oh, would we as thieves do that? Would we return the monies that were already given to us that was found before? And if there is one guilty here, let him die. Let him die. Now that's not the comment of a guilty person. And the rest shall be what? Slaves. Why, this includes Benjamin. They're very sure that they are innocent, aren't they? They are, in fact, innocent. But they're just going to appear that way. Do you notice again now? This steward has some authority. He changes the agreement. Only the guilty one then is going to be bound. And what does he do the search? From the oldest to the youngest again. And you know their confidence is being built. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all down to 10. Their confidence is being built that we are innocent. And then Benjamin's. Then Benjamin's sack. And there it is. And they show the traditional way of grief, that they rent their clothes, but they keep their vow and return to the city. They keep their vow and return to the city. Joseph confronts them. He confronts them with the situation. And Judah speaks up for the group. And he confirms the original pledge that they'd made if they were guilty. But Joseph refuses and says, "No, my steward has changed it. He represented me. This is what I will stand by." This is the one that he is going to stand by. And we find now a speech worthy of the ancestor of our Savior. Judah requests a private audience with Joseph. He retells the whole story. Joseph hears that he is torn to pieces for the first time. Judah indeed fears for his father's life, and Judah sacrifices himself freely for Israel. Is his descendant going to do that? Is his descendant going to sacrifice himself for all Israel, all spiritual Israel? Those that were of physical Israel and obeyed, did the blood of Christ pay for them? Yes. Did it pay for all those in the patriarchal system? Yes. Does it pay for all of us in the Christian system? Yes. One man giving himself for spiritual Israel. And here we have his ancestor, Judah, offering himself as the sacrifice. Take me. I will take his place. I will not hurt my father. I will not disobey him. Take me. Release him. We have a wonderful Savior, don't we? We have a wonderful God who loves us enough that he takes care of us and provides a sacrifice for us. Next time we'll come back in on chapter 45, where Joseph reveals himself then to his brethren. See you then.